Hi there, good morning everyone, or good day whenever you're watching this online, and welcome to the latest Brixton Housing Co-op how-to webinar. We're online at the moment, and today's session is about effective communication skills in person, online and in person. And I'm delighted that joining us here is Angelica. Angelica, thank you so much for joining us here today. Angelica, I'm about to pull up the screen, but whilst I do pull up the screen and share my screen, I'd love to hear what's brought you onto this particular session and today. Tell us a little bit about why you were drawn to this particular session.
Well, hello, Rashid. It's lovely to see you. And I must say, I'm just seeing, because I have the papers from this, this is the third time I'm coming to join you. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is it's so useful, it's so helpful, and I find that's why I join again. It's a reminder. It sinks each time I come and join you. It sinks in, and it's a life skill. I really appreciate it's something, you know, I can use. It's good to know within the co-op, but it's also good to know everywhere. So, yep, I'm glad to come and join you.
Thank you so much. And I think you've said it really, really well. These things are life skills. And interestingly, Angelica, I think you're so right that actually these things about communication skills, it's good sometimes to dip back in, because the more we do it, the more we feel comfortable and at peace and so on. So in terms of what, I think you've answered this question. So in terms of, well, let me ask you this in slightly different way. Well, then from today, what would particularly be useful for you in terms of communication skills and influencing?
Well, I think, you know, because with the virus crisis, and we are much more at home now, it's language and communication, I think, is even more important than it has ever been before, because I mean, now, for instance, I only see you on the screen. I only see your face. I get much less messages than if I'd see you personally. Mm-hmm. And so I know it's a good idea to learn to, you know, language-wise to improve, and also getting the hints just from seeing a face.
Really good point there.
You know, kind of, rather than, I don't see your whole body. I don't see the environment that much. So I have less clues, because the one thing I noticed regarding communication, I feel very different, you know, as if we would sit opposite each other.
Right. You know, let's pick up on what you said is powerful, Angelica. So you've already said, look, in today's world, I mean, when we're communicating more online, and during the time that we're recording this particular occasion when everyone's having to stay at home and so on, but probably more and more we'll be communicating like this. So, and you said it's kind of very different. There's less body language, there's less to read. It's different to, as though we were there in person. So that aspect of it is important. As you said, language is important. So what we'll do is that today we're going to be exploring both that the communications, if you like, face to face, but also if we were online and email. Some of the things will apply regardless, and then we can explore some of the things that perhaps are more nuanced, as you said. So I'm so glad you said that. Were you going to just add one? It looked as though you were just going to add one more thing there, Angelica.
No, I think that is, and I mean, effective communication skills is, I know, you know, kind of one difficulty I still have is when my emotions get hold of me. I mean, when there are nice emotions, very nice, but you know, kind of negative emotion, when I start feeling critical or feel angry, then I know I lose my effectiveness in being heard by the other person.
What you're saying is powerful, Angelica. What you're saying here is powerful. It's so honest. And I think that's true for many of us, isn't it? So there might be times where we communicate very well and it's fine, but then there might be other times, maybe something's upset us or we're not quite sure or whatever could be going on. And then the emotions can get the better of us, and then we communicate poorly or we don't communicate at all. And so we'll keep all of that in mind. So Angelica, where we're starting really here on this journey is, and I think this will, what you've said will chime with many people who are watching this and playing this back, is then with the psychology. So what we've got here on this slide is this slide here. Okay, why don't you see things my way? The idea here is that each and every one of us human beings will see life, events, situations and circumstances very differently based on a whole range of things which we have listed here. We have different ideas, don't we? Different beliefs, different values, might be different language. That might be language in terms of language we're born with and taught. It might be technical language or colloquial, slang or whatever. We might have different information. We're making different assumptions, perhaps, about ourselves, the situation. We've got different agendas. One person's agenda is to keep the door open. Somebody else's to keep the door closed. Somebody's the temperature higher or lower. We all have different agendas. We've had different upbringings, isn't it? We've been brought up differently with different values and all the other things. We've got different viewpoints, we've got different perspectives. It was lovely when you were talking before also about the perspective in the room, but we've also got different perspectives based on all sorts of things, isn't it? Viewpoints on the world. We've got different prejudices. And at this point, some people often, Angelica, say, well, I'm not prejudiced. But if we take the word and we think it, break it down, prejudge, we might prejudge what this course is going to be about. We might prejudge what the conversation with our neighbor will be like because we've got to make a complaint about, they haven't put their bins out or they put the bins in my side of the street. We're prejudging everything, what the weather might be like. And status, this person is a doctor, this person is a nurse, this person is the elder sister, this person's the younger brother, status, the boss, the colleague, the senior manager and so on. Status can sometimes come into it. And we've just got different circumstances that might be going on, that have been going on for ourselves that will then affect then sometimes our emotions and some of the things that you talked about there. Angelica, so any thoughts that you've got when we see this in terms of that we need to be aware of in terms of the psychology? We can see there's a lot going on here, isn't it? That these two people, and they could be absolutely any people, any gender, any ethnicity, any ability, disability from anywhere in the world. And then when we add into that things like different abilities or disabilities and so on, strengths and weaknesses, we've got qualities and personalities. We've got this huge range of factors. So any thoughts that jump out to you, Angelica, that one thing you want to say?
When I think about in relation to the co-op, it's also what I see a very powerful aspect of psychology in it is the history, when people have had history in what happened 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And I find that is also very much, in terms of why don't you see it my way, because of and that happened there. And
can I pause you there? Because what you're saying is powerful, Angelica. So isn't it interesting in a situation like that, it could be, there's almost like the historical background,
of
the people, of the co-op, of the organization, wherever it is, isn't it? And also then for sometimes what information, somebody's got all that historical information. Somebody is perhaps coming to a committee and they've only got their own more recent information. So you're so right. And then when you can add other factors like status or the circumstances, it can be, and different people have got different values and beliefs. You can see that we could be at a committee meeting, let's say, or at any meeting in our work. It could be 12 of us sat around the table or 8, and we're all coming around the table with different knowledge, different insights, different expectations. You're so right here. So, and I think that also brings, can you see these things at the bottom of the screen here? So we've got some other key factors here: different personalities, different priorities, different desires, different fears. One person wants to get this piece of information through. One person's really keen to achieve that. Different needs, different kind of drivers. If you take somewhere like a co-op, at some point somebody's very concerned, they haven't got full-time housing, they're concerned about having a permanent roof over their head. Somebody else's need might be more of a sense of belonging, building friendships, or it might be far more about their work. We've got different needs and different drivers in any setting. And again, as I was touching on before, we've got different people, different skills, abilities, beliefs, agendas, information. We need to be aware of that. So, for example, we're at a meeting. I've got to be aware that different people have different skills and abilities. So what different things am I getting people to do? And the last one here, different concerns, constraints. I might be a carer. I might not be able to engage as much. I might be doing this, I might be doing that. Different constraints and different resources. So before we try and influence somebody or before we are wanting to communicate, it's useful for us to be aware that there's all of these factors. And that's why, Angelica, it can be complex and why it can be a journey. You know, it can be a journey, and why even when we might be quite experienced, we might sometimes find certain situations become difficult because perhaps of the personalities. Suddenly the personalities in the room have changed, or, you know, there are certain factors there at play. Can you see also on the right-hand side of our screen, some kind of tips here in terms of communications? Well, so we've got here, first of all, rapport. What's your thoughts, Angelica, on this thing about rapport? And I put this, first of all, as number one, that rapport is really important. And in fact, I want to just do one thing. Well, maybe I'm going to come back to this. So I'm going to flick between these couple of slides here, Angelica. So I've put here, along the side here, rapport, respect, relationships, and so on. And I think what I'm going to do is begin to explore, well, how can we begin to move from that situation where all of these things are between these two people to where perhaps there is more rapport? So if we flick, first of all, to the next screen, what we've got here is this screen about, okay, how is it that we can begin to build this strong rapport? Now, let me ask you, what does this word rapport mean to you or suggest to you?
Oh gosh, that's a difficult one. You know, rapport, it's getting a rapport means basically it's like being open-minded and find a way to discard all that history, all that prejudice, which is very, very difficult.
Right. So here we.
I mean, it is this listening. You know, I think that is. It needs an openness on both sides for something new and different to happen.
Wonderful. What you're saying here is beautiful, and it leads us beautifully into this slide. So you said it requires that openness, it requires that listening, and to be able to perhaps see beyond, or at least put to one side perhaps the history. So here's what we've got. So if step one, if I listen, oh, tell me a little bit about yourself. Oh, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on this particular issue. When I therefore listen to that person, and then perhaps I ask, you know, you talked about being open. I ask open questions. Oh, tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts on this. Tell me a little bit more about what brought you into the co-op or into the organisation. Or tell me a little bit more about, we're asking these open questions. What do you think? How do you feel? These open questions, as opposed to closed ones. Do you agree? Don't you agree? Once we ask open questions, allows the person to bring a lot of themselves, or their thoughts, their feelings, and then all of a sudden I can begin to understand because I've listened, I've been open, and I've asked these open questions, and I can understand. Then I can begin to relate. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I didn't know that about blah, blah, blah. Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, tell me a little bit more about. I can then begin to relate. Oh, I understand now, because I hadn't recognized that because of that. I can begin to relate. I can then speak clearly. I can then be understood. And it's a bit like, you know, I put here the dance of great communication. It becomes a dance. And I think your word about openness is key. Do you see, it becomes this kind of a dance, because then we become curious. We've given the other person the space. I've moved beyond my own, all of this stuff, my own ideas and so on. And I've allowed space for the other person to present and to share. And then interestingly, and what happens here, Angelica, is this list of things along the side here on this first slide begin to happen. We suddenly have rapport. Oh, that's interesting. We might laugh and joke or smile. Oh, I understand exactly what you mean. I had that experience. And then interestingly, Angelica, this second word on this list here is interesting. Well, in fact, the second and third words here, respect and relationship. So tell me, what's your thoughts here that what happens once we find that we've got rapport? And sometimes, I mean, I'll give a really simple example of it. Let's imagine we're stood at a train station. We're complete strangers. The train hasn't arrived. I don't know if you've had the experience. And then somebody says, oh my goodness, I can't believe that, oh, I'm going to be late. And then somebody then else pips in, and suddenly there's rapport, there's joke, there's warmth, and people perhaps more respect. You know what I mean? There's a little mini kind of a relationship. Okay, the relationship might just be about, we're both here trying to get to work or what have you. So tell me, any thoughts that's striking you about these words here in terms of that help us move from being stuck in our own heads to begin to be open to the other person, and then beginning to develop this respect and this relationship?
I don't think I can say much to it, because it is, if you are open-minded and you are really, I don't know, interested in the other person rather than just being interested in your very own agenda, then, you know, automatically you will have a sense of respecting the other person. And, you know, and you have contact with each other. It's something real, you know, kind of, you are not bashing in each other's heads. You want, you know, to say dance is really nice, to have a communication dance. And of course, that is then much more likely that a real practical result will come out of that, you know, kind of something that both sides are also happy with, rather than one feeling hard done by and the other think I've won. Then you get sabotaged because, you know, because it's a fight then.
You've talked us through these things. So you've said, look, when there's that kind of openness, then that rapport happens. There's the respect. Then there's a relationship, and it will be, okay, we're colleagues, or that, or we both get on, or we're both neighbors. There's a relationship. Then we're more likely to be able to build this sense of reliability and responsibility, and we're then more likely to share information, isn't it? Relay and refer information. And as you said, then we're more likely to kind of get a result or work together rather than sabotage. We're more likely to want to share and be reciprocal. And there's this win-win. It's about both people. So you're right, that openness that you talked about, Angelica, is absolutely the key. It's absolutely the key. I want to, before I talk on some of the other dimensions, I want to just touch on something here that might, again, just be useful for us to be aware of. And the thing that you said about the openness, I mean, somebody might be watching this and feel, oh, Rashid, there's quite a lot to this. But actually, your key point about being open and realizing, okay, I've got my own life experiences, they've got their own, and by being open, it allows this rapport and this dance to begin to happen, where we learn and we share and so on together. So what I'm going to show now is just one other thing that helps us to understand some of the dynamics of what's going on. Many people perhaps may have studied, if they've studied things like psychology, or fields like my own background field in coaching or other fields. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And basically what it's saying is that us human beings are a number of different things that we have that are going on that affect our needs. And therefore they are going to be important before we do anything, or how we engage in anything, for us to be aware of. So in other words, the first one is the physiological needs: food, water, shelter, and so on. So during the time that we happen to be recording this, where there are big public health concerns and so on, people getting their food, water, shelter, and worried about, you know, just the day-to-day basics are key. So before people can engage, if these needs aren't being met, they may not happen. Imagine going back to school. If a kid at school hasn't got these challenges that are going at home, they might be less likely for them to even be in the school classroom, or for them to be able to engage. Then the next thing is around our safety needs. We want to feel safe and secure. So if it's in a meeting, let's say we talked about the co-op or whatever, if I don't feel safe, valued, or what have you, or perhaps heard, or open to be able to share my opinions, then it's going to be that I may not engage. So that safety and feeling safe and secure is really important, which is why building that rapport with people is important, making them feel valued. And then do you see, then all of a sudden it's about this thing about sense of belonging, relationships, human relationships. So suddenly once we build that rapport and we get to know each other, then suddenly there's that sense of belonging. So again, Angelica, you said something that made me touch on this. Let's imagine we're talking about in a co-op or in a committee. Let's say somebody new's joined a committee. They might be feeling a little bit unsure because they don't know that group. So we've got to try and make them feel welcome, so that they feel as though they belong and that they are more likely to open. Then next up, we've got this sense of self-esteem, a sense of accomplishment. So we want to belong. We might want to feel important. We feel valued. We've been recognized. We're wanting to perhaps do things. We're more likely to engage. Think about the workplace. We want to feel in some way rewarded for our efforts, for our time. That might be rewarded by just people saying thanks. It might be in recognition in the workplace through payment or through status or through just giving back or in all sorts of different ways. And we'll all be different with that. Those self-esteem, the sense of achievement, or just a job well done, or that I was able to play in a co-op, I was able to play my part and give back. So for me, you know, we were talking just before this call about these sessions. And I said, for me, I just love being able to run them and perhaps to do something that people might feel value. So for me, that gives me a sense of accomplishment. And then at the top, we've got this sense of self-actualization, you know, fulfilling oneself, one's purpose. This is going to be very different to some people. For some people, it's about a sense of humanity. For some people, it's spiritual. But that sense of finding, you know, themselves, that part in humanity. If you think about it, certain organizations like co-ops are based on this broader sense of connectivity, purpose, community, and so on. So these are just some of the dynamics there that are at play, but we might not see that are going on between human beings. Anything you want to say about this, Angelica? And I can see that lovely smile as you're looking at this.
I just think that it's just so lovely, the, you know, kind of the top one, you know, kind of which is about achieving a full potential, because I mean, the co-op is just such an amazing group, a community in a way. And I think, again, just, you know, at the moment with the virus, it's like, you know, it's, isn't it wonderful that we are all part of a community? And, you know, it's up to people how much they want to tap into that. And, you know, still having their own freedom and, you know, what they want to do. And I think that that is quite an accomplishment, you know, that our co-op still exists, you know, after 40 years. So the self-fulfill, I think, you know, regarding communication, it's very easy to just think of meetings and, you know, kind of the running of the co-op. But, you know, there is so much more to it. And I think it's really lovely that that gets more and more communicated now.
Right.
With the letter well, I know I very much enjoyed, you know, kind of being part in making the banner, you know, the Brixton Housing Co-op banner.
So you've talked about so many things here that are magical, Angelica. So you said, look, that self-actualization piece is really important. And then that, you know, there's something about the history of the co-op, which my guess is all about that belongingness and a sense of community. And you said, you talked to also then when you talked about the banner, was that sense of accomplishment also linked to doing something. So you've talked us through all of these things. So if you think the co-op is a good example, we exist partly to achieve these things at the bottom, to kind of help people with their security and their housing and those basic needs. We're doing it through a sense of community and belongingness, through achieving things like building the co-op committees or achieving all sorts of things in our own lives. We have that, the self-esteem needs met. And there's an opportunity of this broader sense of belonging, so magical. So, and often when these needs aren't met or spoken to, it's very difficult to influence or to engage with people. So this stuff is really important for us to keep in mind when we're going on this journey. What I want to touch on now, Angelica, is some of the personal impact factors. It was interesting that I think that when we just began this call, you said, look, Rashid, it's interesting, for example, when we are connecting here online in person, I may not get as many of those dynamics of here online. We may not get as many of the dynamics as if we were here in person. So what I want to talk about is some of those different elements. So what we've got here is that if you think about it, there's appearance in our body language, isn't it? There's what we're wearing, and how we show up, and how we're here at home. We want to be relaxed enough, isn't it? We're in our homes. We're not too formal. So our appearance is comfortable, what's comfortable for us here, isn't it? It might be, we might have let's say if we're going for a job interview, we might be more smart. We might have chosen to wear a jacket, a tie, or a blouse, whatever we're wanting to wear to be smart. So there's the appearance thing and our body language. And as you said on this call, we've got less body language. There's less of me that we can see. So there's less body language here. But then there's our appearance, all sorts of aspects of appearance. There's some things that we can control, some things that I can't control. So there's some things that I can't control. I can't control my height, my ethnicity, my gender, and those kind of things necessarily. For the most part, but there might be other things in terms of my appearance I can control. What I'm wearing, maybe it's a more informal event, I'm just in the t-shirt, or it's more formal, maybe I'm more, I've chosen to replace this with a more formal jacket, I've shaved, I've what have you. So there's the appearance and body language. That's usually the first thing that we encounter, isn't it? Even before somebody's spoken, so for example, when people are walking down the street, we see that. Then we've got our voice. And it's interesting here with the voice, there's a number of different dimensions of that, isn't there, Angelica? Let's break that down. What bits of the voice have we got? What are the ingredients of voice? I guess we've got our accent. We've got our volume, isn't it, of our voice. We might have the pitch of our voices. Your voice and mine will be pitched at different places. The volume, the pace that we're speaking at. I speak quite fast. Sometimes I need to be aware I need to turn that down. You've got a nice pace to your voice. So you're lucky, in terms of that. But sometimes you might want to speed it up or slow it down. So there's all those dimensions of voice. And then there's the actual words that we use. And you said right at the beginning of this, sometimes we've got to be, especially at times like this, aware of the words that we use. Now, the thing that we've got here in this pie chart and this thing about the stats aren't saying that the appearance and the body language is more important than the voice, and that's more important than the words. What that's saying is that, and I could give an example of this. If I was to walk into, let's say, a room with other people, I was to say to people, and I'm going to demonstrate this by bringing myself back full screen, just to demonstrate this, you can see a little bit more of me. So I was going to say, imagine I was coming into an event saying, hi everybody, my name's Rashid, and I'm going to teach you today about communication skills with confidence and how to do that really comfortably. You're then thinking, I don't believe this guy. And you start thinking about this. You start paying 55% of your attention to my body language, because you can see it's belying what I'm saying. I'm nervous. I don't seem comfortable. You're paying about 38% of attention to my voice, because my voice is quiet, I'm shy. And you're paying only 7% approximately to the words I'm saying, because the words I'm saying aren't aligned to what I'm saying. So, and that's why, and we human beings are very adept at spotting this. That's why we watch the TV or somebody in front of us. And have you ever seen that thing, Angelica, where people are, when people have switched off, because they can tell that I don't believe that person. I don't believe them. Is there? Because we can tell.
Let's not talk politics.
And it happens in so many situations. It might happen in the family, meetings, in the workplace. So it's important that we are authentically ourselves, that we try and show up as ourselves, but mindful that all of these different dynamics are part of it. And there are some times where we do this naturally. We're going for a first job interview, or we're going on a date, or we're going to an important dinner engagement. We're aware of our appearance, we're aware of how we use our voice, we're aware of how it is the words that we use. But sometimes we kind of forget that in other scenarios. So it's important that we're aware of those very important dynamics of influence. Then we've got to be aware of that there's some other factors also too. And this is an interesting one, that we learn in different ways. So be it that I'm wanting to run a training session like this, or whether I'm wanting to get some information across in a newsletter or a piece of, in a pamphlet or at a meeting, or in any kind of engagement, it's important that we learn in differing ways. And if you're watching this at home, I want you to think about which of these ways do you learn best? And what we can see is that I put up 3 main ones. There's very visual. So for example, if I was to do this, imagine that we had no slides for today's session, Angelica. Look, let's imagine there's just no slides. And let's imagine that for a moment, imagine I'm going to just demonstrate this. I'm going to bring us back on screen and I'm going to stop the share for a moment. But imagine for a moment, I stop the video. And if imagine for a moment, you stopped your video. It's hard, if I'm very visual, okay, a picture of me has appeared on the screen, but some people, if you were to, on the bottom of your screen, Angelica, it says, it might say stop video. I wonder if you'll stop the video for just a second on your screen. Right. So now what's interesting here is I can't see you. Angelica, I'm finding it hard because I'm quite visual to engage. I'm finding it less dynamic. If you turn your camera back on now, do you see the visuals of,
rapport then? That's already a rapport then, rather than just, kind of nothing.
you see, so online even, that rapport, but through this has given us more ways of rapport. So what we've got here is that we've got the visual. So for some people where they're highly visual, we need to be aware that that's important for them. So I beg your pardon, let's just go back. So we need to bring in the visual element. Okay, so we've got to be aware of that. Auditory, so the visual people, it's like they like to see things, they like to look at things, and it also comes across in some of the language they might use. They might say, how does that look to you? There's people then auditory. People who they learn through listening, through hearing, through talking things through. Now, I happen to know that you and I both have a high degree of auditory in our learning styles. From knowing you, you're the kind of person talking things through, listening, having discussions around things is a large part of how you learn. So imagine that if I was somebody who, let's say in these sessions, somebody who just had all these slides, but there's no room for me to ask questions, I'd find that really hard to learn. So let's say there's just visuals, but there's no discussion. And then we've got people who are kinesthetic. And I loved how at that moment, Angelica, you reach for your paper and you reach for your cup, because that's more doing, it's more touch and feeling. We might like to learn through doing things. Maybe you want to scribble some notes down to engage, or I want to do a practical exercise. I feel as though, if it's a bit like, going back to school. Kids who you just put in front of slides or whatever, and they can't do interactive things, or adults too, they might get a little bit anxious. They want to do things, move things around. Maybe in meetings, they want to be able to type things in or look things up or move things around. So we've got to be aware that people learn in different ways. That's why sometimes if you take your traditional board meeting, just papers, talk, and so on, many people switch off or they find it hard to learn, because we need to bring in a range of different learning styles. Maybe we've got some visual things, maybe we've got some talk and some discussions, and we've got some visual slides as well, so that we can learn in a range of different ways. So Angelica, anything you want to say briefly about this?
It reminds me of a guy, kind of who's been quite high up in a big corporation. And he always managed to get big audiences listening to him. And he did that with humor. Mm-hmm. And I thought that is, anybody who has got a sense of humor, I think that is something that can be used very well, with the auditory, kind of.
Really good point. So how you use these.
That engages people really well, when there is I call it the lightness of being. Mm-hmm. When, something is, some learn, because at meetings, it is all about learning. You exchange, information and create actions from it. But that's what I'm sometimes, lightness would be always really beneficial.
Right. So again, you bring us also through, so that person was engaging partly through the auditory, but it, it was interesting, you're talking there, you use far more of your hands, so it might also be through the physiology of how they were and getting people to move or to laugh and so on. So what's important here is for us to realize, what's my blend of learning styles? And, what's mine, what's my predominant, or what blend? I think the more of this we do, the more we find that we are a blend of each. I'm a blend of all of these. And there are certain things that I might prefer more the kinesthetic doing, certain things I might prefer the listening. So, and also it's worth thinking about, how do you learn best? And also what learning style is the person you're trying to influence? It's safest to use a range. And that person who you said was highly interactive probably used a whole range of ways. Interesting, here they were using the verbal, physiological, there might be people using music. There's the thing about the social interactions. We've got a whole range of here. So I don't want to get too caught up in too many different technical things, but the more we can blend it, words spoken, that's why sometimes even before, at certain events, before the events start, people might have a little bit of music, or there might be something social, or people, think about the co-op, we'll connect through things like by food. We're using a blend of different ways to begin to build that sense of connection and rapport. The other thing that we've got here going on that's really important is that we all, as human beings, have different personalities. We've got different personality types and styles. So what I've got here, this is just Rashi Yoganlaru's quick guide to different personality types. So we've got, and I think if you're watching this at home, and as you're watching this, Angelica, I'm going to get you to put your hand up if you either are any of these, or if you recognize and think, oh yeah, I know people are very much like that. So we've got people. These are people like people. It's about feelings. It's about people, purpose, meaning, helping. We've got lots of those people. I can think of people like that in the co-op. There are lots of people. I can see a big nod. Right, then we've got process people. These are people, it's about facts, details, tasks, roles, systems, qualities, procedures. I can think of people in the co-op who are very much like that. Just in the mood. You've then got very pragmatic people. These are people, they like to roll their hands up. They may not even be interested in meetings. They want to get on with it. They'll just be ready to do the things that need to be done and so on. They're very practical, very, very who, what, why, specific. They might be very much into making, creating kind of things. They like to get on with it. Political people, power, influence, strategy, the risks, who the key players are, what's going on in the field, the big picture. Political people, again, it's worth thinking about those at home, at work, in the different environments we find ourselves in. And then you've got philosophical people. It's about ideas, learning, ethics, reflecting, meaning, growth. So it's worth thinking here. What I put down here for fun that you can do if you're at home or if you're doing this is thinking, okay, what percentage am I of these things? If they were all to add up to 100%, what am I? What percentage of those key people that I'm trying to influence? You might be thinking, you know what, my boss at work, or that person in that committee, or my neighbor, I really want to get to understand what percentage of them, oh yeah, they're quite high process. I'm quite high people. Maybe that's why. Maybe I need to talk more about the process because I'm not talking in their language. And then you can begin to ask yourself, then you can begin, what we can begin to explore here is, the idea here, Angelica, is that most of this will be a blend of these. We might be high in one and lower in another. But also what's interesting for us to be aware of, each of these has different strengths and potential weaknesses. Yeah. So for example, could you pick one of these types out and tell us what you can perceive as what might be some of their strengths and what might be some of their weaknesses. So if you pick out one, then I'll pick out one. But we'll do this very, very briefly. We might not have time to go into them all, but pick out one of these people types. Personality type.
Not easy. I take one that I'm not that familiar. Process.
So process. Okay, so Tim, what's your thoughts? What are going to be their strengths? What are this person of process going to be good at?
well, things get done, kind of somebody clear-headed, kind of who is, kind of mathematical, I want to say, but it's not the right word for it, very focused on taking one step after the other.
Right.
So I think for organization, it's fantastic, a person like that.
Brilliant. A wonderful example of what you're saying there. So you said, look, they might well be clear-sighted, they're focused, they can follow process, this step, that step, getting things done, organizing things they're going to be good at. What might be their potential weaknesses?
That they get lost in just that aspect and lose sight of a bigger picture, kind of people's feelings or including other people.
Right. What you're saying here is very powerful here. So it might be, and it depends how they blend it with others. They might be lucky enough that they might, let's say, have a high degree of people skills. But if they didn't, if they weren't majoring in process, then you're right. They may not see the bigger picture. They may not be as good with the empathy. They may not get the people side so right. So again, by me becoming aware of what I major in, I can think, oh, you know what, I'm in this community group now. Whilst I'm good at process, maybe I need to spend more time listening to the human bit, why we do this and so on. So the idea is that the reason why often we're not great at communicating or communicating with certain people is that we tend to be stuck in our own style and forgetting that if I'm speaking to the finance director, I probably need to speak to in a fair degree of systems, facts, process. If I'm speaking to people who are very community orientated, I need to speak far more people. If I'm speaking to somebody who cares, has got lots of philosophical views, I need to talk about ideas, learning. If I'm dealing with somebody who's making things happen and political, I need to be aware of the power, those dynamics, the big picture, all of those kind of dynamics of things. If I'm dealing with somebody who likes to get on with things, I need to make it very action orientated. So this is huge when it comes to influence, especially understanding people and influencing people. So my thing here is it's worth reflecting on what are the things here that I need to dial up and what are the things I might need to dial down depending who I'm trying to influence. And it might even vary from moment to moment. So if I've got a mixed room full of people that I'm trying to influence at a meeting, I then probably know that there's probably a bit of all of that. So I might say, hi, everybody. And I'm going to imagine, as I go through these, Angelica, I wonder if you'll do me a favor. If you could put your hand up each time when you think that, as I go through this list, raise your hand if you feel that I might be speaking to that personality type. Good morning, everybody. Great to see you coming all back here. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for being part of the team and for doing your part. It's great. We really appreciate you being who you are, being here, being part of our committee. Can you see, first of all, I'm talking to the people aspect so that they are feeling heard. Then I might be saying, right, just to talk you through today, our agenda has got a number of different items. We're going to start at the top with who's here, and then we're going to go through this because today we need to look at A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and by the end of the meeting, we need to go through this process. And by the way, the process for today's meeting is X, Y, and Z. You see, I'm talking to the process person who might want to know, okay, what's going on and what's the process? They might say, but just if you've got any questions at any time, raise your hand. I want you to be able to feel as though you're part of this. You know what I mean? So I'm speaking to the pragmatic person. Stop me at any time if you want to do this. If you need a cup of tea or coffee, feel free to do that. But I'm very mindful, let's just set the context of why we're meeting here today. Our committee is all about trying to improve. You see, I'm speaking now to the political people, and we need to be aware that these and these challenges are going on. But we should also be reflecting on why we're here. That's just me playing around with speaking to all different types. Because if I'm one of these types and I'm not being spoken to, I might lose interest and might be thinking, why has he not talked about the process? He hasn't said anything about me as a member, as a human being. He's not talked about the broader political context right now. So that's giving us a good idea of that. Anything you want to say on that, Angelica? Actually, maybe I should put that slide back up just in case there's anything that you want to share. And this is huge when it comes to communicating with people.
It really is. And I mean, if one has got that skill, that's the thing. If one has got that skill to have that level of awareness, I mean, then one is a fantastic chair, basically. You know, because that yes, I mean, wonderful. What comes to my mind and has been through is the level of time, because all this, you know, I mean, communicating with each other means allowing time.
Yes.
I find that's the one aspect. Very, very often I have that sense that it's not enough time, and that's, you know, kind of the rubbing point, you know, because just that.
What you're saying is magical, Angelica. I think what you're saying here is magical, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think you put your finger on such a good point, because sometimes because we are, especially if you take the context that often we're busy, we've got busy lives, and there's a number of things we're wanting to do. Doing this requires time, thought, and so on. And time might be part of the challenge here. And often, you know, when we see communication go badly, let's take, for example, people are friends or they're related or in the workplace. You might even have people who generally have got good rapport, but because of time, they do it badly. Oh, I didn't have time. I didn't explain that. I said, oh, Angela, can you do that? And all of a sudden, we've normally got a good rapport, but because I haven't taken that time or be aware of it, things become, you know, suddenly tense. So you raised such a good, important point. So I think what I want to do here with that in mind is I think that what I want to do is jump through a couple of the slides to give us a sense of how can we manage time and all these dynamics effectively.
Perfection. That's brilliant.
Do you know what I mean? So I think what I want to do is so I think this next slide might well help us with exactly what you've said. I think the thing is, Angelica, what we need to do at this point is we need to kind of step back and think, okay, with any interaction, be it that I'm there to take minutes at a meeting, I'm wanting to go for that job interview and gain that new job, I've got new clients in my small business that I'm wanting to bring on board, whatever it might well be, I'm wanting to have a party for family members. The first thing to ask yourself is, what is my goal? What is the objective? What's the outcome that I want? That will save you a lot of time, being very clear. What's the objective? Is it that you want the washing up done? Is it you're wanting people to volunteer to be part of a new committee? Very often, we don't think clearly enough about what's my objective. So people who are often very effective, Angelica, they start off by thinking, what's my objective here? So they can get through a lot of detail quickly because they're clear what their objective is. They're clear. So then they can identify much time and what they need to do, and they can develop a strategy. The next step is, who is my audience? Who am I speaking to? Now, the interesting thing here that's powerful about thinking about our audience, who are they? What their desires and their fears. So imagine if we were delivering this session here to a group of young children, I would have delivered the whole session probably in the amount of time, in less time than we've spent on the call today. We've been on the call today for almost, you know, for heading toward an hour. I would probably do this in a few slides, very, 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 very quickly. It might be, I'm going to demonstrate it. Let's say, hi everyone, great to see you here today, kids. We're going to talk a little bit about communicating, affecting communicating. What do you think about when we talk about communication? Well, for me, it's about our words, it's about this, yeah. It's about all of these things. And we've got all of these different things going on. You know, we've all got different ideas and beliefs about the world. And you know what? The key thing is listening, how we listen and the questions that we ask. You know what I mean? And there are all sorts of different things that are important for us, feeling safe in our homes, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. So how I would deliver this whole thing would vary hugely. There'd be certain slides I wouldn't even include. Who is my audience? What's going to bore them? What's going to excite them? And what's the context? What's the environment? And then we need to decide, okay, what's going to be my message? Given my goal, what's my message? Who's going to be the best messenger? Is it me or is it going to be Angelica? It's going to be Angelica because Angelica's already got that relationship with them. Angelica's going to charm them. Do you know what I mean? Who's the best messenger? And what's the best means of delivery? For some groups, is it going to be best delivering it through these slides? Or it might well be, we don't deliver it with any slides at all. We deliver it as a quick chat. So these things are incredibly important by us being mindful about what's my goal? Who's my audience? What's the message I'm trying to get across? What's the best means in delivering? Who's the messenger? So for us with these kind of sessions, this kind of webinar or in person is incredibly important to give people enough room, space, time, and the beauty of the fact that both of us are here going through this content is appropriate because there's a lot of content to go through. But can you see, this, Angelica, will save you a lot of time with anything, thinking, okay, what's my goal? Who's the audience? What's the environment? What do they need to know? The environment bit that I said here is important. Right now, we're doing this in the context of COVID-19. Which is, so after this, it might have even passed, so people might know, well, what is COVID-19, big public health things? The environment has been a public health concern. We're both at helm. We can't do this in persons. We've got to do this online. And that therefore shapes the best means of delivery, which in this case is online. So depending what's going on, who's the person? Maybe the person's got different abilities and disabilities. Maybe phone's going to be better for them. Maybe so there's a lot for us to consider, but if we give this some thought up front, it will save us time rather than spending all the times on putting together all sorts of papers and documents. And the audience, the audience of teenagers, who wants to read a lot of papers? I've wasted my time. Over to you, Angelica. Any thoughts on this?
No, that's very, very clear and very important. Kind of not to lose sight of what it's about.
And also then crucially here, timing. What's the best timing? You were talking about time. How much time do I have and how much timing do I have? We've got probably about half an hour max to complete this content. So with anything we've got, I've got to be aware if I'm delivering training, how much timing, let's say I'm running a meeting, how much time before people have got to go home, they've got to go to sleep. So I've got to think about my content also in terms of delivering. So I've got to think about, I need to be clear, I need to be calm, I need to be concise, but take something like this, I need to be concise, but I've also got to be comprehensive enough to give people enough detail. I need to be considered about what I put in, what I say, but it needs to be compelling and interesting enough for people to want to listen to it. And I need to think about what's the action, what actions am I wanting people to take based on that? With that in mind, I'm going to say then what we need to do by way of a little bit of an initial summary. Know yourself, know your goals, know your objective. Consider your audience, what their desires, their fears, their needs. Learn and watch what's going on in the environment, the external factors that might be important that I might to bring in. Plan and prepare. That time spent on up front before the meeting, thinking Angelica's thinking, who have I got? Let me spend a little bit of time. I'm going to give them this and that. That little bit of time preparing, being there early, might save you time during the meeting or the event. And then thinking about that delivery, being clear, calm, concise, considered, and thinking about the follow-up. What's the actions that I need to take? And then what we've got here is the importance, and you said it right up front, Angelica, language, listening, tone. So there is a dance to be done here. I've got to, on one hand, give people enough time and give them room and space, but at the same time, there's an outcome. So I've got to keep things moving. And this tool over here about giving people feedback, starting off, that example I gave of starting a meeting, good morning, everyone. Let me just quickly go back to that. Good morning, everyone. Great to see you here. Thank you so much for being here for today's meeting. Now, I've started to use this feedback sandwich. Angelica, why have I started that meeting with something positive rather than saying, oh, good morning, everyone. Now let's get on to it. First thing, number one, rent arrears. Why have I started with this positive feedback, Angelica?
Everybody feel good, and it gives that lightness I was talking about, kind of stuff. It's got the human touch. We are people together and we are wanting to work on something.
Absolutely, already we feel warm.
It's opening you up. I mean, I feel then open rather than immediately think, oh, the rent arrears, what's coming now? And so it's like, it's a foundation for the whole meeting, I find.
Wonderful. So we've set that up with the top bit of the sandwich, the foundation. We feel warm, we feel open, we feel valued, we feel belonging, all the things we had in that hierarchy of needs, we're engaged. So we are engaged. So then we can then move on to and they're giving feedback, the constructive feedback. Okay, team, there's a few things that we're going to be going through today. There's the minutes, just a few things we also need to correct. And so we're ready to hear the other bits of what we need to do. By the way, I noticed that last time we started our meeting late. Is it possible that we could arrive at 8 o'clock? on time, so we can begin to give the constructive feedback and whatever messages we need to, but then we warm it up. But overall, thank you everyone for being here today. Thanks so much for taking on those actions. It feels enveloped. So the idea here is that without the top and the bottom bit of this sandwich, everything gets a bit messy. Any message I'm willing to deliver, anything, whatever it might well be, it gets messy because I haven't taken that time to start and end with the constructive feedback. And we can think about people who do it. Oh, why haven't you done this? Oh, everybody, you know, we all feel like this, isn't it? I don't want to belong to that committee. I don't want to speak to that neighbour because every time I speak to them, all I'm hearing is usually negative feedback. So I've stopped going along to that committee. I don't go along. I don't want to speak to that boss. So this stuff is really important.
I mean, the one thing that I think is really important about this feedback sandwich is, you know, to mean it. Because what I've noticed sometimes, since, you know, kind of, it is also, how can I say, it can be a strategy, you know, kind of the feedback sandwich. And then I sometimes can hear it where it's just words, but it's not meant.
I love what you're saying, Angelica.
Important. You need to mean it, then better not say it. Not as a, you know, like, I remember with assertiveness, it's like, I hear what you are saying. And you're thinking, no, you have not heard a word I have said. You know, so that is, you know, not to use it as a standard blah, blah. It has to be meant.
Angelica, what you're saying is powerful. There's a few things. I don't know if people will be able to see it, but below the picture of where we are, I'm going to need to move this. I don't know if people can see this. Otherwise, it ends up, I feel that person's just either just talking at me,
Yeah.
or you know, you can tell by the language they're using or their tone, I don't believe them because the tone didn't have warmth. I didn't feel as though I was involved. I didn't feel as though I was being collaborative. They weren't looking for the real win-win. They weren't doing this. They weren't really asking, or they were just using this as a technique, as you said. So you're absolutely right. So what we've got to bear in mind is that there's a number of things that we need to do here. Yes, we need to be clear about our goals and so on. And a quick tip here, we want to think about communicating as though we're speaking to an intelligent 12-year-old, so that anybody, maybe like this girl here, so that anybody can understand what we're saying. So it's clear, so it's not full of jargon. We need to be considered about the timing, our approach, and so on. We might need to be considering about people's feelings, a bit like you've said. We need to think really carefully about the content, the start, middle, and end, a bit like that feedback sandwich. How am I going to start what I'm saying? How am I going to continue it? How am I going to wrap it up? I know I'm going to need to be succinct because otherwise I'm going to elude people, but I need to be comprehensive, setting the context, making sure people know enough. The bit that you were talking about, the care and focused, it needs to be done in a way that's warm and relevant to that audience. It needs to be compelling to make people want to. We've now got serious times in the co-op. We need people to volunteer because we've got these challenges, but I need to have the charm, but it needs to be genuine. I need to be warm, polite, personable, and genuine. I need to be consistent, following procedures and so on. And my style needs to be consistent, and I need to check. I mean, this is especially relevant with online communications or written communications. But this thing about communication and cooperation, otherwise people feel, I don't believe them. I felt that I was spoken at. I feel that the person was disingenuous. And this is relevant for any type of communication. So Angelica, you put your finger on something so important here. There's on the one hand, the time, I feel that a little bit of time spent really thinking this through up front will save me so much time in the long run of relationships I might lose for years if I don't get this right. So it might require that little bit more time, but you'll see the person for a meeting or in a one-to-one who's taken that time to think things through is able to get far more as a result than the person who needs to ask somebody 100 times and who is therefore wasting their time because they've not invested the time. Any things here that on this list here that jump out to you or you want to say a word more on, but yeah. So it starts with me. You know, the magical thing here, Angelica, it starts with me. It starts with each and every one of us. Me being aware, how do I see myself and how do other people see me? What are my strengths? In your case, Angelica, I mean, we've talked about this before. your personableness. You've got this, I've said it to you, you arrive in a meeting and straight away, I think, oh, it's going to be great because Angelica's here. It's going to be warm. There's going to be a nice sense of humanity. You know, we're all going to have different styles. I might be the kind of person where the facts, I'm organized. So it's about being aware of what are my strengths. I'm the kind of person who maybe can keep the meeting going. You know, what are my strengths and how can I bring my own strengths? And the beauty of somewhere like the Co-op and anywhere, we all have different strengths. What we've got to try and do is to draw out the strengths of the people person, of the philosophical person, make them feel valued. What are my weaker areas? What might I need to work on? Okay, maybe I need to work on listening more. Maybe I need to work on slowing my volume down. Maybe my voice down, my speed of, what are the things, what's the help and support I need? So the more we can be aware of this for ourselves and others, the more we can help ourselves progress. What are my strengths? And to be kind to ourselves. So this begins with self-awareness. From this so far, Angelica, can I ask you, what's been your observations for you in terms of communicating in all the places that you might need to communicate, be it the Co-op, through the things you do for your self-employed business, or generally, would you say the main strengths, and what do you feel are the development areas, if you'll be happy enough to share?
It's just, you know, with this, I just have a sense that there is so much I still need to learn. And I mean, I don't know what, I mean, I'm thinking of my shortcoming, and that is very much how...
But let's start with your strengths. I want to pause you. It's so important that we start with our strengths, because often, you know, what you say there is powerful, because Angelica, what you said there is common. Very often, we're so aware, or we've been taught to only think about the shortcomings. We might forget, you're great with people, you're brilliant with this, and all of a sudden, if I can start with that, I feel, a bit like you said before, I feel confident.
Right, yep. Well, strength is, I am curious. I'm always very curious. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I want to know, you know, about the other. The other strength I'm developing more and more is to rise above this situation, to see what's going on, rather than participating emotionally and, you know, being counteractive.
Wonderful.
So
that's powerful strengths.
You're learning a lot, you know.
But Angelica, those are powerful strengths. That the curiosity, the person's got that thirst. Think about what that adds to the Co-op. It means that person is really good with scrutiny, asking questions, inviting other people in, sharing that kind of enthusiasm, the personable skills, and then the skills you're saying you'll develop to be able to see the big picture. So what? And I think the thing is that we're all on this learning journey. So for example, for me, my strengths might well be, okay, I'm quite good with people. I might be quite strategic. The things that I've learned, that the areas, and I'm quite good some detail. For me, I think the areas that I've learned to develop is that giving people time, being interested enough, being patient. These things for me is that learning journey, realizing that different people are in different places is really, really important. So again, for you, Angelica, what would you say if you had to maybe just pick just one development area? What's the one thing that you think that would make a really big difference for you in all your communications? If you just pick one development area.
To stay clear-headed. Clear-headed, that's it. To stay focused, that's, you know.
That's magical.
I won't say more, because if I start, it will be endless.
That's really magical, because then I think what's really powerful that I'm hearing, I think my tip for you then, Angelica, is that being this slide here and a couple of the ones before, being clear about your goal, who am I, what am I trying to achieve, being really considered, what's the best approach, the content, how much do I need to say? What do they need? They just need A, B, and C. They don't need to know E, F, G. These things will really help you. And you know, that thing about, you know, that slide, I think this slide for you, if you were to take nothing else away from today, and it would just be this slide, Angelica, for you, this would give you everything that you need. This one slide, what's my goal? Who are the audience? What do they want? What their desires and their fears? What's going on in the context? You know, this slide, in a way, sums up the entire session today. If there were just one slide.
That is the most important one.
Yeah, along with knowing a little bit about the different people types, I would say it's that. So with that in mind, Angelica, I'm going to jump through some of the next slides, because It's about being clear. It's about being cooperative. It's being about compassionate. One tip here I want to also say here that's really useful, because I'm going to slip over this. I might leave it for another session. But I would say where communication gets really difficult, I'd say, what's your intention here? What's my intention when things get really difficult? You know, when we lose it or we feel really short or what's my intention? Because if I'll own this for myself, when things get very difficult, and we've got a whole different session on dealing with difficult event situations, so someone will come back to this. I sometimes, we can get caught up in either proving that I'm right or scoring points or disengaging. I'll ask myself, hang on, what's my intention? Is my intention to prove that I'm right? Or is my intention to try and be kind or try and learn or try and help things move? And suddenly it straight away changes my mood. And I'll then just be kinder. And then the input that I bring is better and my impact is better. So I think this is where the compassion bit, being kind to yourself. And sometimes it will be, you know what, today I'm not feeling strong enough to have this conversation. You know what, right now, I'm not ready to take part in that committee. I need to step back. Being kind and caring to ourselves and caring to others, I think is huge, and it will improve. And that ties with the lovely thing that you said, Angelica. You know, when you said, you made this beautiful point about, you made this really, really beautiful point about how you can tell when people are disingenuous, or you didn't feel that it's not, or if there's not the integrity there. Mm. You're talking about the credibility. You were talking about, so we've got a really good way of being able to tell that. So when I think, but above everything else, what we're wanting to be is human. We're wanting to be ourselves. I just want to put here, I just want to pause that at that moment for a moment and say, for anybody who's watching this, beyond everything else, we're wanting to be ourselves, and we want to encourage other people to be ourselves. Then suddenly the rapport bit is there, and we can begin. Maybe then what we do need to be aware of additionally then, when it comes to certain types of communication, like if we're communicating then things on email, we need to be aware of things like email, that again, some of the things are really important. What's your goal? Who's the audience? And is email actually the best? It might be too complicated and too convoluted to do on email. It might be better that we do it on call. Email isn't secure, and it's not a fix-all. You can't read your tone, so be really extra careful when you're using it. Be aware of the ethics, etiquette, policies, and procedures. So don't send a too chatty email when it needs to be more formal. Be aware of that. Always be, I'm a big fan of always being personable, professional, and polite. So it might be, dear blah, 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 I hope that you're well. So that beginning bit of the email is warm, so that it's personable. Just writing to you about. Use clear subject lines right at the top. When people don't put a subject line, put a subject line. Yeah. Subject around next committee date. Give it a clear subject line. Try and keep it clear, crisp, and concise. Is really important. A quick tip here is keep clear, separate email folders. You might have lots of for your work or through here. I've got lots of clear sub-files for lots of things, for different things. Pause, think, take time out. If things get tricky, pause. Are you ready to respond to that email today, or do you need to do it after lunch or tomorrow? If things get heated or complicated, take it offline. Remember to manage your energy. Remember things like deadlines and timeframes and so on. I think that's really important with emails. Do you have any thoughts here? I'm going to keep this slide up for people who are watching this at home, Angelica, but do you have any thoughts here about emails particularly? I think it's important that people do it with care and that they're mindful. Sometimes you might need somebody else. If email isn't your best thing, you might need to get somebody else to help you compose them. But just being mindful is really important.
Now, I'm just aware of how important the heading is.
Yeah.
Like giving an idea of what this email is about, because lots of people just do their reply thing, and the reply keep the heading from 2 months ago. I mean, it's exaggerated, and it just doesn't bring one up to date when one looks back at the email. So, yep. other than that, no comment.
Brilliant. I thank you so much. I really like that. It's funny, we're talking about communication, so I'm going to use this as an example of it. I sent during this an online communication to which I'm trying to respond to. And I think with communicating, email's a really good example of this, how often what happens, I'm demonstrating what I'm talking about right now. We've got so much content that we cannot be present. So I'm here trying to send this message and I'm caught up with things. So with emails and all sorts of things online, be aware that sometimes we've got so many different types of communicating that we're not clear because we're caught up in things. So you want to try, and I'd say with email, allow a little bit of time. What's going to be the email time? What's going to be the in-person time, so that you've got time to read it, you've got time to respond, you're not overwhelmed. But yeah, and I love the point you were making there, Angelica, about simple things like clear headlines, key headings. If the topics change, then put that in, and be aware to try and keep it quite simple and straightforward throughout, but know when you need to take it offline, or when you can deal with things in a meeting or elsewhere, or a phone call or what have you. Who really needs to see the email? Does everybody need to be copied into it? Know when people do need to be copied in and when people don't. Be mindful. And if you're not clear about it, ask for other tips and advice from other people. Is all I'm going to say about emails right now. Being very, very, very mindful about email.
There's one more thing, Rashid, what I noticed regarding texting, emails, whatever communication, that not everybody, including myself, don't always read everything. And it's very interesting how often misunderstandings occur, about meeting times or, whatever. I mean, about important aspects. And that's why I wanted to get advice from you. How can I know the sandwiching is good, to have it, right in the center, as clear as possible. And still, because I think we all have such an overload, it's like not read or not taken in.
You're saying so many things that are powerful here again, Angelica. Thank you for saying these things. I think you're right. This is where, in one of our early slides, we talk about even people's circumstances and so on. We've got to bear in mind that different people have they're in different places, they've got different strengths, different skills, different preferred means of communicating. Some people may well be very busy, they may get 1,000 emails, you might just get 10 every day. And some people might prefer it, reading it that way. Some people might find reading a screen like this, even this, they might find that somebody might be watching this, finding this quite dense and quite difficult to take on board. Different attention spans. We've been running for quite a long time. We've got just 10 minutes left. So we've got to be aware of this. So I think the things I need to be aware of that. Try, if I'm a chair of the committee, to try and find that out from people about what ways of communicating to people like best and to different people like best, and with different friends and colleagues and so on, or if you're a boss and so on, find out what works best. Try and pick the best means of communications. Know that you might need to do it in a number of ways. Know that email by itself may not be enough. It might need to be done in person or for a call. So I often like doing those. Hey, I've just sent you this email, but I wonder, could we have a quick call to chat it through? And what I want to do is demonstrate a very, very quick email as an example. So do you know what I mean? So that might be a good way, doing a little bit on the email, a little bit elsewhere, but being mindful, and don't expect people to respond too many times, but set expectations maybe of your committee about how often people will read it and what have you. So here's what we've got, is an example of what we talked about. Dear Maximilian, then the subject line, inquiry subject line, whatever it is. And use one, but change it if the topic changes, and next communications meeting, what have you. Thank you so much about your email regarding, so it's clear and concise, regarding the change of meeting date, regarding getting new volunteers, regarding the rent statements. You mentioned that you would like ABC, so list their points. You mentioned in your email, Angelica, how we do this, how to be polite, how to do this, how to do that. So you mentioned their points. What we can do is A and C, so imagine that this was a letter, let's say to, I want to imagine let's imagine it was employment and finance. Regarding rent arrears, blah, blah, blah. Regarding your email about rent arrears and how I can pay, you mentioned that you'd like us to email you and to let us know when this and this is going on or when these things change. What we can do is make sure we put it in the newsletter. We can make sure that when we write our statements to you, but it's your responsibility to make sure you read the statements and so on. We're not able to do blah, 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 blah. So you might put down simple headings, simple bullet points. So you've acknowledged what they've said in bullet points. You mentioned A, B, and C. And what we can do is A, B, and C. We can do A and C, but B is your responsibility. So think about structure. So this structure will probably help you with most emails. And it then goes on to say, you may also be able to get some help by talking to management about this or membership about this, or it might be you raise something that might be useful for communication to refer to. So signpost and refer to other people. If we can help regarding blah, 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 do drop us a line. Do you know what I mean? Yours sincerely and your name and so on. So this is just a really good structure that you could use as a basis of structuring one's thoughts.
Yeah.
Just in terms of time, I'm going to jump through. So I think that there's a couple of things I just want to share before we close, because we've got a few slides more to go through. So I think what we want to do here is being really aware, managing people, demands and expectations. Be aware, what are you trying to achieve for yourself, your committee or the co-op or whatever. Keep the big picture in mind. Ask yourself what's really important and what's not, and what's really important right now and what's not. Do you know what I mean? That's really important, because otherwise you might realize right now, for example, we're doing this during the pandemic, it might be people feeling safe and secure and that we carry on running and so on. It might be completely different in another situation. So what's really important, what's not? Knowing yourself and your own habits. Remembering that you've only got a certain limited amount of time. So for example, this session, we've only got about, we only happen to have 7 minutes more. We could have spent more time, and then really just be clear. Know when you need to be clear, know when you need to be firm. So there might be times we need to be firm with people. I can do A, B, and C, but I can't do A, B, and C, but I can do A and B. We go into this in far more detail in our session on dealing with difficult people and situations, which we're running in May and so on. So we'll go into that in more detail. So I won't spend too much time on that. So as I put here, do check out our how-to on managing difficult people. And in that session, I go far more into detail how we can manage those difficult situations. There's some tips on this slide, so you can pause this at home or on playback. There's some tips here on managing successful meetings. Those we cover in our managing meetings session, so you can always pause this and have a read of that. I go into this in more detail in the managing difficult people, managing complaints, but you could pause this or freeze it. It's worth noting, being aware that we can often have distractions and so on that can help us. So I put some tips here about knowing your habits, knowing how long your attention span is, knowing this is a really good tip here, for example, Angelica, knowing what your most productive times and the times when you're not productive. So I know I'm better in the morning. After this call now, I'm probably going to need to rest, and I know anything else I want to do, I might need to do it later in the afternoon. Allow certain time, boundary your time, allow times for emails and social media. Give yourself time for that distraction. If you know you're going to be distracted by your phone, then build it in, because you know you're going to be distracted, but try and build that in some way. And so on. Have gadget holidays, the times where you don't have the gadgets or the emails. And set up yourself some clear systems. There's some tips here that I'm going to leave up on this, that people can pause. Some simple systems, to have clear systems, to take regular breaks, to organize their files, having simple to-do lists, and so on. So there's some simple tips. So I'd say, Angelica, my tip for you is after this, you might want to pause on this slide and revisit and think, are there any things here that will be useful for me, that would just help me to organize? In the in-person session, we do some demos. We're not going to have time to do this. I cover this more in the Getting Things Done session. So here's a bit of a summary slide. And I just want to ask, in the final 5 minutes that we have here, Angelica, and this has been a very, very fast track. And at the end, one thing I want to demonstrate here is, did you notice I had to, because of time, dark focus and slides. So I needed to say to people at home, if this interests you, pause, come back to this slide. If this is important to you, pause, or come along to our other sessions. So time will always be finite. But so that's why for me, timing is really important, and knowing that we want to finish on time. So Angelica, are there any last questions that you want to ask, or any last observations that you're wanting to pull out?
No, I'm just thankful for being reminded on, you know, communication skills, and it just makes me realize how very, very important it is, and, you know, that it's something, you know, kind of, I definitely will try to continue learning and improving, basically. You know, yep, that's it. So I only can say thank you very much, It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Angelica. And I think that, I mean, just by way of actually summarizing, and maybe what I'm going to do is actually one last time, I actually will pull up that last slide one more time, just to summarize for everyone at home. So whatever kind of communication you're doing, in person, online, by video call like this, or in an email, in person, whatever, be strategic. Know what your goals are. Try and break that into steps. Plan and prepare yourself, other people. There might be papers, information, or whatever you need to do. You might find that it's really important to build certain strong relationships with people. Who are the people you're looking to influence? This is what I mean by build your network, and be collaborative. With communicating, we need to be proactive, we need to be positive, we need to be personable. And remember, when all of our communications, we want to be clear, we want to be crisp, we want to be concise, we want to be compelling. We also need to be considered. I think also with communication, we need to rest, relax, and recharge. We get so much information, we can be bombarded with it. So set yourself time, give yourself downtime, relax time. The gadget holiday is also important. But like Angelica is saying, review, refocus, fine tune. We're all on this particular learning journey. And I invite you, if you're at home, to think about what are maybe the 2 or 3 actions I want to take. Okay, you know what? I want to bring in a little bit more of this into my learning style. You know what? I want to focus on listening far more when I'm at this meeting, or speaking up more, or turning up my volume, or thinking about X, Y, and Z. But Angelica, once again, I just want to thank you so much for being here on this call and sharing for us on this webinar.
Thank you. I always appreciate your how-to workshops. I think they are fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much. And just to say to everyone, if you're interested in other ones, well, there's a whole range of other ones coming up. We've got coming up, and this year, we've got coming up, dealing with difficult situations, personality events, chairing and attending effective meetings, mindfulness and compassion, and resolving disputes amicably. So, and there's a whole range of others too. So check out our website, check out the YouTube channel, lots of these you're going to need to see, and look on the newsletter for more of these. Angelica, thank you so much. Have yourself a wonderful day. And see you
too. Have a great time. And keep healthy, like everyone.
Likewise. Thank you, everybody.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.